Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Merryn Somerset Webb.
Hello, Merryn Talks Money listeners. It's Merryn Somerset Webb. Before we get back to our regular programming in early September, we are bringing you something very special. Recordings of the conversations I had at Panmure House for the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Fringe is a 3-week arts and culture festival that began in 1947 and takes place in Edinburgh in Scotland every August. For the past few years, I have been hosting conversations about markets, economics and investing from one of the most special locations in Edinburgh as part of this festival. I do it from Panmure House, which is the last home of Adam Smith, philosopher and father of modern economics. Is where he completed the last editions of his bestsellers, The Theory of Moral Sentiments and The Wealth of Nations. This year, we did a 3-day run towards the end of August, and we are bringing you the slightly edited conversations from those 3 days. The panel I hosted on the second day featured, again, Bloomberg senior reporter John Stepek, also Richard Wilson, CEO of the UK's second largest investment platform, Interactive Investor, and Dominic Frisby, author of the Flying Frisby Investment Newsletter, and also author of a new book just out called The Secret History of Gold. I think we will probably go straight into the show because you all know my jokes from last year already. There's no point in going through them again. I have 3 excellent guests, and what we're going to do is keep the format exactly as it has been in the past. Everyone's going to tell me their favourite Adam Smith quote. Well, it's not quite their favourite because everyone's got quite a lot of favourites. John, how many favourites have you got?
At least 7.
At least 7. And then we're going to talk around their quotes. So the idea is to make it a very open conversation between the panel. So my guests on my right, I've got John Stepek, who lots of you probably know already. John writes the Money Distilled newsletter for Bloomberg. On my left, I have Dominic Frisby, who has just written a brilliant new book, The Secret History of Gold. And you will know I think it's brilliant because I say so on the back of the book.
You say it is possibly the best timed book ever. What a lovely endorsement. Thank you.
My pleasure. Dominic also writes the Flying Frisby newsletter. And on my far left, we have Richard Wilson, who is the CEO of Interactive Investor and the COO of Aberdeen Asset Management. Right. The first quote is going to come from Richard.
And thank you very much for having me today. And hello, everybody. So my quote was... Labour was the first price, the original purchase, money that was paid for all things. It was not by gold or by silver, but by labour that all wealth of the world was originally purchased. And I'm sitting there, obviously mulling over that and thinking about our current reflections on technology and AI. And you kind of have to, and I think there are 2 different views of this story. There's a view of AI that it's a life-enriching thing, that everyone will have, their roles will be enhanced and there'll be time to invest in the things that you enjoy. And then there's the sharp end that I work in, where I have about 1,000 people in II who are working very hard to make you fabulously wealthy and happy. Every day we're trying to improve our efficiency so we can improve our experience and ultimately improve our price position. But the reality is that we have in our company every year currently now we see a probably 25% improvement in productivity. This year, as an example, year to date, this year versus last year, we're 20% bigger than we were last year. Thank you very much. But we have 10% less calls that come into our contact centre. And those calls are handled about 15% faster because of the tools that are available.
Can I interrupt quickly to ask you, when you say there are fewer calls coming in, why are there fewer calls coming in? Because people are finding the answer to their questions via the chatbot or something like that?
So that's a great question, and we look at that as if we master all of our information. I think there are several factors, but one of them is the experience is just better, because you don't, obviously customers call in to tell me how wonderful they think I am. To be fair, it's never happened.
It will now. He likes it.
So they call in because they're struggling to find the answer to a problem or a decision, or they're not happy with something. And if your experience is better, you have less reason to call. And as an example, I think last year, in terms of basic coding, nearly 2 million lines of code was written by AI for us. And we wouldn't put ourselves out to be particularly special. So part of that is just the experience being learning faster to help more people. So we've about 500,000 customers, different age, demographic, behavior, norms, context. The experience needs to be something that works for each of those individuals, and one person's simple is not the same as somebody else's, so it needs to be adaptive and smart. So you've got that picture, and to look more broadly, in the UK today, we have about 1.3 million people work in contact centres, 900,000 people work in software development, 400,000 people are taxi drivers, 400,000 people are in HGV or delivery, and another 600,000 in other delivery. Those roles, as I look at what's happening to us, you can see quite rapidly some of those roles simply disappearing because the machine just does it faster. And my worry for us is that I think today we've got something like 33 million people in employment in the UK. That we're going to see us over the next 3, 4, 5 years a material shift, which is going to challenge some of the basic premise about what the price of the value of labour is, and the ability to reskill is going to be very, very difficult. And it wouldn't surprise me if we were talking about structural unemployment, which is kind of 1, 2, 3 million over the next 3 to 5 years, which is very hard to deal with.
But on the other hand, if the very thing that you're talking about is the great productivity revolution that we've been waiting for so long, that could transform the way that the economy works in general.
But that's okay. There's that thesis. Now you look at somewhere. If you're looking at somewhere in the Midlands where the only employer in the town is the contact centre, and they have more than one generation in the contact centre, and the people who run the local shop because people in the contact centre spend their money there. The notion that skills are fungible and or mobile, and the ability to learn new skills is a single generational thing, I think is just made up. Where I come from, when they closed the open cast mines and the textile mills, those jobs, that was a 2-generation issue. If you took massive action to try and fix it, otherwise you created significant social and dislocation. And I think my sense is that without massive action, that's where we'll be.
What kind of action?
You need to have forced reskilling. You've got to have enormous incentives to learn new skills, which have to be sponsored at a state level, or you'll end up with the case in Dundee we know that post the Timex closure, 30 years of a structural social hole because you haven't forced the community to move into new skills.
Okay, what are these new skills? Because this is a question that, but we're talking about questions, right? And I bet you're all thinking when it comes to question time, you're going to ask, what do my children learn? What skills do my children get? What do they study? What's going to be left?
Well, certainly, from where I look at the healthcare is an enormous thing. Data is an enormous thing. And data, it's not going to be simple data analysis because the machine will do all that. This is data from a kind of a neuroscience perspective where you're learning how people's brains function in response to data so you can improve outcomes for them. The ability to understand the structure of information. So data, health, education, they'll be, and obviously today defense, there will be big things tomorrow. All these mechanical skills, coding, answering phones, doing accounting. Most accounting work is collating information, all gone. And God help us, the self-driving cars, which will be emerging fairly soon.
Yeah. But it sounds like you're saying that it sounds like all the lower end jobs will be gone and only higher end jobs will remain.
Yep.
So you have a situation where
you have a real situation because that gives you social unrest.
Yeah. Gives you massive income disparities, wealth disparities, and no end of problems, which might bring us back to universal basic income, which we could return to in a minute, except for I know Dominic is desperate to say something.
Well, I just wanted to ask a question is like, I can just see, a lot of people just sinking into the welfare trap, the same welfare trap that all the miners fell into in the 80s. And, is welfare the answer?
Well, it can't be the answer because it's unproductive. I mean, where I came from, you had more than one generation on welfare, so that became normalised. and that creates all sorts of side effects that we all read the stats about, drug abuse and various other. So you can't let that happen. You've got to fire hose the skill set and force it out, create incentives, push people to actually do things they choose not to do, because humans are pretty lazy. If you don't force it and force that people to take those risks, you will end up with a welfare trap which you can't get out of.
Now you're talking about massive changes to the welfare system and changing the incentives built into the welfare system.
You absolutely have to do that.
That is the kind of thing that won't happen for a long time.
And for those who don't take those actions in welfare, you have to frankly provide penalties if they don't take those actions.
I mean, that's extraordinarily difficult, I suppose, and then there is the whole point about and then what are they actually learning if the rate at which AI is starting to suck the jobs out of the market is that high? I mean, I suppose the thing, because I guess I always kind of go back to the thing of, but every time we say technology is going to replace jobs, and actually we do end up being fine or having new ones. And you're right, the local communities that are screwed over by these things aren't fine, and we should find a solution to that. But in terms of things like mass unemployment that robots were going to cause like 20 years ago, that kind of thing hasn't happened yet. I mean, do you think that AI really is the game changer on that front, or?
Well, the answer, of course, is who knows. But I look at what we're doing today, which is accelerating, and the power of this stuff is extraordinary. It's just extraordinary. And it moves. It's not just what it does, but the rate it's learning is extraordinary. So we have, you have a context where we'll receive 10,000 bits of correspondence a day, and we have a bunch of people whose job it is to organize all that, put it in a file, and send it to the right person. The machine, within 60 days, had learned how to do all that, kind of 99.4% accuracy, and just did it. And you're thinking, okay, that's a bit uncomfortable.
But it also feels like in a world of falling fertility and falling population growth, etc., this seems like a wonderful thing in that we have fewer workers. We're going to have many fewer workers going forward. And at the moment, we try and solve what turns out to be a non-existent problem with immigration. But possibly the problem doesn't exist. We don't need a rising workforce. And so AI seems like the solution to all the problems that are running through my head right now.
Although you have an aging population as well, and a pay-as-you-go social system, so you bankrupt yourself in the meantime because you can't. Who's going to pay my bills in my 80s? Because it's
making it very difficult for me to make this conversation go in an optimistic direction. Really doing my best.
But
here.
the opportunity. But you have to skill up. This is the thing. You can't sit back and wait.
I'll say something. I sort of take up on John's point that I mean I'm absolutely captivated by everything you say, but I sort of take up on John's point that a lot of these things we say it's going to happen and then we find a way of muddling through. That said, I mean having sat in a self-driving Tesla in Florida earlier in the year and gone, this is a far better driver than I am, and you know I'm a okay driver, and but you know I just think driverless cars are pretty much inevitable, and the main barrier is regulatory, and so you know that's the government's choice when they want to allow it, and you know they can stop it happening, but you know it just means we'll lose because we'll be less productive. But in any case, so that's 1 million jobs, is it? We're going to lose to driving.
Well, the taxi drivers, there are 400,000.
And then there are
300,000 HGV drivers, and another 600,000 delivery drivers.
Okay, so
according to Llama 4.
So 1.3 million driving jobs. That's going to go to. We're going to lose between 500,000 and 1 million jobs, aren't we?
That is a superb thing, though. I mean, self-driving cars would be like Star Trek sort of world. I mean, that would be fantastic.
But the question is not whether it's a wonderful thing. For the consumer, it's a great experience. So the question is, between that point and the next opportunity for that community, how do you get there? Yeah. And how much is there is it a shock versus a transition? Because it's a shock that
I wanted to ask a question of you, Dominic, that again, I'm taking all your conscience in. I know what you're thinking about, and you're thinking exactly what I'm thinking, which is that when the roads are full of self-driving cars, surely nothing will ever move, because every teenager in Scotland will amuse themselves by running up and down the road so that all the cars constantly stop. Right? So that's what self-driving cars do. Every time there's anything in front of them, they immediately have to stop because they must preserve life. And if I was a 15-year-old boy, I can already see myself, my life is spent running in front of cars.
All trucks will between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. You won't see them anymore because they'll optimise their
It's even more
logistics.
fun for 15-year-old boys.
So they'll all be gone. No, because they don't need to sleep. They just manage, and they don't need to be far apart. You'll have convoys of aerodynamic vehicles 3 feet apart between 10 p.m. and 3 o'clock in the morning.
Doesn't really answer my question, but I'll agree to move on.
You said, Merryn, that it was a low-end job thing. As those of you that know me, I do about 73 different jobs. And one of them that I've done ever since I left drama school when I was, I'm 55, so this is a long time ago.
You're looking very good, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dominic also does health tips, by the way, in his newsletter. So,
but I've one of the ways I've earned my living is doing voiceovers. Now that has been kind of annihilated by AI, and so that industry is 30% of what it was. I write my flying Frisby Substack, but I use AI all the time. I get AI to proof edit it for me. So what you used to do, John, once upon a time, you're out of a high-end job. I get it. It writes really good titles. It writes much better titles than I do. I get the picture at the top of the article designed by AI. So I'm reducing work for graphic designers, but then at the same time I would never have used a graphic designer, so it's created something that I make my unacceptable music videos, and the guy who I make the unacceptable music videos, we both use AI like absolutely mad. So at the same time as losing me work, it's also made me more productive. And if you go back to Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, when however many people, each of varying professions, walked to Canterbury in whenever it was 1380 something, of those 29 or 30 jobs, I think 26 of those jobs still exist today. Now obviously the nature of those jobs has changed, but the job still exists. And that's been through industrial revolutions, digital revolutions, goodness knows what. So I put it to you that while work will change, there will still be most jobs, just the nature of those jobs will change.
I think that's very fair. Every time there is a big revolution, we assume that everyone will end up unemployed and new jobs just sort of come out of the woodwork. There's always something new. And if you think about the jobs that many of our children do today, we couldn't have imagined them 30 years ago. So that's a fair point.
I think that's valid, but it is all about the transition speed. It's because the humans innovate, will always be kind of learning new tricks, but it's how fast you can move, which is the question.
Before we leave AI, because we do like to talk about investment, I'm going to ask John, should we be investing in AI-related stocks?
I mean, honestly, I think the only problem with AI is the valuations, isn't it? And I mean, in the last couple of days, even we've had a bit of a drop in the kind of big AI stocks again. Now, I mean, they've got the momentum behind them. Everyone's spending an awful lot of money. My feeling is that it's probably, a capex bubble, and it'll pop, and it's probably a wee bit late to start buying NVIDIA now. But at the same time, it's probably worth having a bit of exposure in your wider portfolio.
If you take on what Richard has said, then every stock is an AI stock.
Well, I mean, except for the ones that go bust.
Yes, if every company is going to massively enhance its productivity, then we're going to see profit margins go up across the board, and it doesn't matter what you invest in.
No, because the margins come down, don't they? That's not true. And I certainly, these are massively valuable companies, but it's the valuations now which, for some, they're so enormous. I mean, you look at Palantir as an example, the valuations are so high that you're using that as a bubble trigger, which says, okay, I'll wait for that to come off and I'll sell, but because you're expecting a shock.
The US is currently about 70% of the MSCI World Index, which is why, personally speaking, I think that's too much. And it's not always been like that. I mean, Japan at one point was something ridiculous as well, wasn't it, during this bubble? Not quite 70, but it was high. And I think the MSCI, 70% is the US, and then the next one is Japan, we're about 5, and the next one's the UK, we're about 3.5. So okay, well, that's interesting.
And of our customers, so we've got about 500,000 And in terms of single stocks, about 20% are non-UK, or 80% are UK and 20% are international, of which 90% is US.
Okay, interesting. We're going to have to move on. Got to do another quote where we're already running out of quote time. John?
So, I mean, this is sort of downstream of what you're talking about, Richard. But so this is Adam Smith talking about the state of the public finances, and this is back in, obviously, when Wealth of Nations was published in 1776. In Great Britain, from the time that we had first recourse to the ruinous expedient of perpetual funding, the reduction of the public debt in time of peace has never borne any proportion to its accumulation in time of war. So nothing's really changed, obviously. I mean, when you go back to the 1770s, so Adam Smith was talking about a time where, there was a lot of war, obviously, because, like I said, there's always a lot of war when I think about it. I can hardly talk about, the 1700s and not think, well, the 1900s were pretty bad as well. But over this period of time, from about, say, the 1690s onwards, we'd gradually been working out different ways to fund the war and raise new debt. So the Bank of England was founded in 1694, for example, which was all about the kind of various wars that were going on in Europe at the time. So it was like the 9 Years' War, which was basically everyone against France. And then there was the War of the Spanish Succession, which was basically everyone against France. And all of these things kind of like led to various kind of the evolution of various ways to kind of raise money for war. And as Adam Smith says, the problem is that after that, because, it's the same problem we face just now. You build up the debt during the time of crisis, and during the time of crisis, like COVID, the reason for building up the debt is because there's an emergency. The emergency is either war, or nowadays it is a thing like either 2008 or COVID. But the problem is that afterwards, you don't want to raise taxes sufficiently because people object to paying taxes. They objected to paying taxes then too. So as a result, by the time the next crisis comes around, you're building debt on top of debt. So COVID hit when we were just starting to get over the hump of the amount of money we'd spent in 2008. And so the question now, obviously, is what does Rachel Reeves do at the next budget? Because really, she's kind of boxed herself in, because the thing that she actually needs to do is increase the tax base across the board. But the Labour government has specifically said that that is not what it's going to do. It's not going to raise taxes on working people, which means people at the lower end of the income scale.
Not even at the lower end, the median worker.
Well, actually, the median worker, this is interesting, because the median worker actually pays less as a proportion of their income than they did, I think it's even 50 years ago.
Yeah. The proportion of income tax by the
think.
median worker in the UK has been falling for 30, 40 years, and the percentage of income paid by the high earner has been rising and rising and rising.
Yeah.
And the median worker in the UK pays significantly lower rate of income tax than the median worker across Europe. A funny dynamic. So if you want to, I'm taking your point away from you.
But you're right.
So if you want to raise a lot of money in the UK, you just slap 3 or 4 points on income tax.
Income tax is what you would need to raise. Because the other problem, because our tax base is very narrow. And again, that sort of means that, well, you're vulnerable to people at the top going somewhere else. But you're also whacking productivity, because obviously the higher up the income ladder you go, the more your marginal pound is taxed. And I think a lot of people, if there are any graduates in the room who have managed to, get into well-paid jobs, then there's a point at which once you earn over £100,000, every extra pound you earn, you're getting to keep less than 30 pence of it, actually, if you're paying the kind of graduate debt back as well. So that's very much a kind of barrier to aspiration, basically. And then on top of that, because something I hadn't really considered until I actually read Adam Smith talking about the tax side of things, just kind of very quickly, is that we also have a very large number of people on benefits who aren't paying any tax at all. And you can sort of see that as actually, that's the base of the untaxed pyramid. So, you kind of need to somehow, one way to kind of reduce the amount of spending would be to trim that bit. And at the I mean, all the things like the Motability payments and the personal independence payments, which are not necessarily actually going to the people who need them, do need to be looked at. Now, of course, we don't have the time.
Yeah, no, one of my favourite statistics during the arguments about PIP was that there was something in the newspaper about how if PIPs were brought down to the level that the government wanted them to in the last round, 30% of people, no, more than that, can't remember the number, but let's for the sake of argument say 50% of people would suffer financially, which made me go, well, hang on, the other 50% didn't need it in the first place?
Yeah, aye.
And so we have a lot of that going on. But let's play the tax game. Let's assume that spending will not be cut, because it's not going to be cut. We all know that, right? So new taxes are required. Anyone got a really great idea for a new tax?
Think of something
Come
that
on,
isn't
they're
already
coming.
taxed.
Huh?
Labour voters.
That's not how it works. That's not how it works. Anyone in favour of CGT on primary homes? I am actually. Yeah. Idea?
Every time you put a prompt into an AI, you have to pay a tax.
Ooh,
That's
an AI
interesting
tax.
one.
Interesting. Any others? Yeah.
Tax on modems. Like no tax for cars.
And what?
Like no tax for cars, so no tax for computers.
Yeah, okay. All right, I don't think that's going to fly either. And it's really hard, this. Anything else?
Cars?
Huh?
Electric cars.
Tax them? Yeah. We tax them already, don't we? The subsidies are falling anyway. Yeah, subsidies are falling on electric cars, aren't they?
I don't know.
I think you have to pay a very low road tax. But you're right,
Yeah.
they are looking at reforming it, because there was a country recently that's just changed it. I think it may be Norway, and it's now, because they went from saying, oh yeah, we're not going to tax road tax on kind of electric cars as much, so that you can all buy electric cars and that's so good for the environment. And now they're sort of like making the argument, because there's so many more electric cars. Oh no, I mean, it's unfair on people who don't use the car very often that they're not getting taxed. So.
Yeah, but all these things are marginal. This is no amount of money. There is no way to raise large amounts of money without income tax.
No, you need to raise one of the big four. You need to raise VAT, income tax, NI, or corporation tax. And of those four, corporation tax raises the least. And the best thing to do would be either expand VAT, just blanket, make VAT 20% on everything, as opposed to all the Mad Wee exclusions. I mean, think about the amount of co-op time it's taken out complaining about working out whether Jaffa cakes are a cake or a biscuit. I mean, that kind of really, some of these cases we go on for years, and at the same time we're complaining we don't have enough court capacity. So no, there's lots of ways to simplify it. It's just it creates winners and losers.
But the one thing we should probably worry about is pensions, right? That's where the money is. There's a lot of money there, right, Richard?
13 trillion in property, 4 trillion in pensions. They want it.
They want it. But property is harder to tax. Everyone gets their knickers in a twist, by the houses.
Sure.
But pensions is easier because most people don't understand their pensions, so they don't know how much money is being taken. So you can change the rules very, very easily. You nervous about that, Richard?
It's not hard. It's to go for the biggest pool. So
Yeah.
pensions, number one, income tax. If you don't go after income tax, you can't really make it work. They've just made a promise they shouldn't have made.
Yeah.
One of Adam Smith's canons of taxation is that the tax should be easy to levy.
Yes. And?
Well, that's the problem that Rachel Reeves has.
Yeah.
The other factor in all of this is that 50% of government revenue comes from income tax and national insurance, roughly. But if we get Richard's mass unemployment scenario, that
We're in
particular...
a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. But your AI should make the public sector so much more productive that we need levy
you'll have
fewer taxes.
lots of opportunities for wealth creation. And I'm only talking about a couple of million unemployed people, not a lot.
Isn't that 10% of the workforce?
It might be.
Yeah, the workforce is not as big as it was. Right. Third quote, Dominic.
So my quote, which I use in the book, in the new book, all money is a matter of belief. And in the course of writing the book, when I had somebody come in and fact check the book at one point, and we discovered that Adam Smith did not in fact say all money is a matter of belief, but it sort of goes along with much of what he believed and much of what he was argued. It's one of those attributed quotes. Now, the word belief and the word credit, of course, have precisely the same roots. And if you look at a pound note or a £20 note, nobody uses hardly any. Something like 99% of money is now digital. and only 1% is cash. But even that 1% that is cash, it says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £20. So even the cash notes that we use are a promise. And as it turns out, they're a promise of nothing. Because once you would get your pound of sterling silver, but now we don't even get that. And the JP Morgan quote is, credit is everything, and everything is credit. Credit is an evidence of banking, but it is not the money itself. Money is gold and nothing else. And if we think about, we've sort of gradually left gold since 1914. We've been leaving gold. But gold and silver, I have a gold, I actually have a silver coin in my pocket. I was going to carry a gold coin, but because we live in a low trust society, I felt it was safe. But here we have
He didn't tell us this, by the way.
Here we have an old US dollar, which was just under an ounce of solid silver. And if I, pass that to one of you, which I'm not going to do, the value...
You trust me.
I'll trust you, Merryn, of course. But the value of that money has now immediately transferred to Merryn, because Merryn holds the silver, and now John. And so it's a bearer asset. Whoever holds the money itself has the value. And that is what money used to be. It is nobody else's liability. But now, today, we live in the world now. Merryn's very reluctant to hand it back. It's nice. It has a nice feeling to it.
I was going to prove to you that we're a high trust society by passing it around the audience and seeing if it came back.
Unfortunately, your listenership, Merryn, is not representative. But in any case, we live in this system where obviously central banks now still hold gold, and we have the role of Bitcoin, which is a digital bearer asset. In other words, whoever has the Bitcoin has the value. But everything else in the world is somebody else's liability. It is credit. It is belief. And when you suddenly look at money and the way that the financial world is built, we just realise just how flimsy the whole thing is. And that is what I'd like to highlight in my little discourse.
Okay, so we all agree entirely with everything you have said, right? So if we are going to hold gold, how should we hold it, and how much should we hold? As a percentage of, let's say, our total wealth.
Well, I have a thing in the Flying Frisbee where I have a thing called the Dolce Far Niente portfolio, which stands for the sweetness of doing nothing. And it's a portfolio that you would put your money in, and you don't need to look at it every day. You don't need to think about it. You reallocate maybe once or twice a year. And we start off with a 15% allocation to gold and 5% to Bitcoin. But obviously, this was many years ago, and so those positions have grown outsized.
Massively, yeah.
And you would say, and a sensible portfolio manager would reallocate. But at the moment, I just think all roads lead to gold and Bitcoin. So we're not reallocating, and we're just oversized. We have a large section to equities, but of which the largest is the US equities. And we have 20% in wealth preservation in bonds as a starting point, but that's probably now maybe 5% or something, because they've all been so rubbish. But yes, I thought this was an old Wall Street saying, and I've used it in my writing many, many times, but it turns out when you Google it, the person who said it is me. So, but the saying is, put 5% of your net worth in gold and hope it doesn't go up. Yeah. But I think in this times you want to be overweight gold and overweight Bitcoin.
And would you still hold more gold than Bitcoin in percentage terms?
I don't. But it's that
choice is you. You hold more Bitcoin than gold, in percentage terms.
Yeah. But I find with Bitcoin, you tend to think there's a sort of it's generational, and they're two different things. One's a digital asset, and one's an analog asset, a physical asset. And you tend to find 1970 is about the dividing point, and anyone born after 1970 tends to be a bit more pro-Bitcoin, and the further you go, and every time anyone born before 1970 tends to be less and more pro-gold.
Okay, let's stick with investment for a minute. What about gold mining stocks?
I would recommend everyone to have 0% of their portfolio in gold mining stocks. They're more trouble than they're worth.
Well, why would
gold
you?
Mining this year?
Why would you even hold gold as opposed to a gold ETN? Why hold the underlying?
Well, because I mean, even though you can retrieve the gold from the ETN, the point of holding gold is the bearer asset. And so as soon as you add an ETN to it, it becomes somebody else's liability. So if you're a purist, that's...
I mean,
right.
also,
But
isn't it? It's the ultimate insurance,
Yeah.
and it's your last resort asset. So if you are a gold believer, like Dominic, and then I'm a gold believer too. If you're a gold believer, it makes surely logical sense to have at least a small part of your gold held physically. Not in your house, by the way. It's not in my house. It's not buried in my garden, and you don't know where I live or where Dominic lives. But it makes sense to hold some physical gold, surely.
Yeah, and wear it, like I do.
And there it is.
Not buried
And what
in his
about
garden.
gold as the anti-currency?
It is the anti-currency.
So say more.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose the thing is the physical thing is about, if you have to get out of Dodge quickly. And actually, it's the same with Bitcoin, because although I've always been not skeptical, just kind of agnostic on Bitcoin, one of the things I can see it's useful for, and actually better than gold for in some ways, is if you are in an unstable regime like Venezuela, say, and this happened, you can ship your money. Well, in fact, you don't even need to ship it, you just need to leave the country and then collect your Bitcoin wherever you end up. And if you've got gold coins, I mean, my dad knew a guy who had to move out of South Africa in a hurry, kind of like about 40 odd years ago, and he smuggled his wealth out in gold coins hidden down the back of their washing machine.
Yeah, my stepdad did that.
Yeah, that is
50
basically the
Kruger
reason
rounds
for
in
it.
his-
Yeah.
yeah.
Washing machines.
Washing machine, well, they rattle anyway, so.
I don't think the reason to own gold is apocalypse. I just think if we just look at what we were talking about, tax, and how the government going to pay for everything, you can be sure that one of the ways it's going to pay for it is currency debasement. And so that's why you own gold. And Trump
as the anti-currency.
Well, precisely.
Yeah, exactly.
The US authorities have said, we are going to devalue the dollar. We need a cheaper dollar. The dollar is not going to be the reserve currency of the world in the way that it was, because we need to get our balance of payments. We need to reshore manufacturing. The dollar is going to weaken. The pound is going to weaken. All roads lead to gold and Bitcoin. You need to own them. And it's not just an apocalypse thing. It's just an everyday practical thing.
Okay. All right, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll end very quickly with asking our three panellists what they would invest in now. I didn't warn them about that. John.
Okay, well, as soon as I said gold yesterday, and I can't take that from Dominic, I think UK stocks, because they are among the cheapest ones in the developed market. And I think that the Americans are gradually turning their eyes our way, which at least is, slightly optimistic.
Thanks, John.
Sorry.
Jolly.
Do you want a general thing or a racy stock tip?
I want a racy stock tip.
Okay, my racy stock tip for you is a company called Comstock Load, which...
Oh my God!
That's just the reaction I want. Which is doing two things. It's going to be America's largest recycler of solar panels. It's building various plants in Nevada, and in California you can't put solar panels into landfills, so they have to export them out of the state, and it's building all these solar panel recycling sites on the border with California next to the freeway, and extracting silver and aluminium, and it's a very cash generative business, and it also has a business in sustainable aviation fuels, is one of its subsidiaries that is raising money at £1 billion, while it currently only has a market cap of $100 million.
Okay.
So it's undervalued.
Absolutely, that was racy and exciting, but it was not investment advice. That was investment information.
I saw you waggling your finger at me as I spoke, and I don't know if that's what I was wittering on too much.
Yeah, because you were wittering.
Okay,
you were wittering.
I should be quiet.
And I figured they can all go and look up the details later. But thank you for that.
I'm trying to make this optimistic. I'm going for armaments and defence tech.
Okay.
It's coming.
Which is effectively a social good.
Exactly, sustainability.
Sustainability.
Yeah.
Sustainability of life.
Called Don't Be Dead, exactly.
We have to end it there. Sorry, we've gone on a bit long, but thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate it. And thank you to my brilliant panellists today. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening to this week's Merryn Talks Money. If you like our show, rate, review and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And keep sending questions or comments to merrynmoney@bloomberg.net. You can also follow me and John on Twitter or X. I'm at MerrynSW, and John is John_Stepek. This episode was hosted by me, Merryn Somerset Webb. It's produced by Sam Asadi, sound designed by Blake Maples. Special thanks to my guests, to Blair Barrows, and to all the rest of the team at Panmure House.